So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first go-to session. I was just telling the people before we got started here that I apologize because we actually had the wrong date. The date was posted correctly on FSO, but technically the announcement itself said Wednesday, but that's okay. We'll have our go-to sessions every Tuesday at 6 o'clock here. Just there might be a change. There rarely is, but if there's any change, we'll let you know through FSO. But for the most part, though, you can count on our go-to sessions being Tuesdays at 6 o'clock here. And then also, we have on our page, we'll always be able to put up the archive right afterwards. So there'll always be a link, and it'll be like a link to like a YouTube page. And on that note, too, I just thought of this too. Let me go ahead here and show you guys before we get started here. Let's go ahead here and let's go to our page. And just give me 1 second here. If you go to our page, now this is going to look different than on my perspective than yours, but somewhere on FSO, if you scroll down here, it's going to be all the way to the bottom on mine. Just a couple of things I want to point out here. We have our own YouTube page, and it's called, if you go to our video resources, if you go to this and you click on the link there, you will notice that we have our whole YouTube page. And on this page, you can see here, it'll automatically start, but you can see here that we have all of our go-to sessions archived. So if you ever miss one, of course, we'll put up the one for the given week on our FSO page, our most current one. But if you ever miss that, we have a lot of our old go-to sessions here. We also have podcasts that we converted into YouTube videos. So there's all kinds of good resources that you have here. Difference between traditional publishing, or how the traditional publishing industry works before you contact an agent, guide to literary agents, and so on and so forth. So we have all of these resources that you can check out throughout this month that you might find useful for the assignments. Now, so what we'll get started here tonight on is I want to make an announcement right off the bat and just let everybody know that before we even get started here talking about the class and everything, this class is unique. I just want to emphasize this because what's different about this class is that unlike your other classes where you sort of have your final business plan in mind, your final EBMS business plan in mind as you go through the classes, for this class, you can take a pause from that if needed. You don't, in other words, the stuff that you do for this class does not have to relate to your final business plan for EBMS. Okay, that's kind of throws people off. A lot of times they assume that they think they have to adapt their projects that we do in this class according to how their final business plan for EBMS goes. And that's not always, it certainly can, they can relate, but they don't have to. What I mean by that is that, for some of our students that come in and their final EBMS business plan is like a nightclub or something like that, well, that's not really going to fit into the projects that you do in this class. Or, just a couple months ago, somebody was going to sort of invent some type of like new technology or something like that. And that doesn't necessarily fit into publishing and distribution. So I just want to emphasize that right off the bat. And then on that note, the stuff that you do for this class can be hypothetical, meaning that we'll go through the projects here, but let's just say that there's a book that you've always felt that you could write, for example, or there's a film that you've always wanted to do, maybe, or a screenplay that you've always wanted to write. You can do that for this class, and you don't have to actually have the content for real. Okay, the goal for this class is to show you how you would go about publishing and distributing that product once you do have it complete. But in this class, for example, we have a 4-week class. We're not expecting you guys to all be able to come up with a book in 4 weeks. It takes a lot longer than that to write a book usually. Same thing with the film, same thing with the video game. Same thing with the music project. We don't expect you to have a CD out there ready to be published and distributed. So you can be hypothetical in this class. So just a reminder to reiterate, the stuff that you do for this class does not have to relate to your final business plan, and it can be hypothetical. The purpose of this class is to show you how you would go about doing that once you finally do have that complete. And on that note, I will tell you that we've had a lot of students that have gone through our class and have actually done this for real, which is fabulous. And we always want to hear about that. even if it's later on, even if it's 2 months from now or several months from now or a year from now even. um, for example, recently there was a student that we actually had about 2 years, well, not 2 years, about a year and a half ago, who's just now trying to get her book out there, and she's letting us know about that. And then she's using a lot of the stuff that she learned in this class for that. Okay, so you don't have to have the content complete right now. You just have to know enough about that content to be able to do the projects for this class. Okay, so just wanted to point a couple of those things out. So, on that note, hopefully everybody had a chance to check out the syllabus. And just as a kind of introduction to this class, we won't go through a lot of the contents in terms of what's in the book, in terms of the first several chapters. But there are a couple of things that just want to point out. But for this class, whether your interest lies in printed media, books and magazines, whether it's music, whether it is audiovisual content, whether it's TV, film, something like that, whether it's video games, whatever your area is, we generally have something for you, okay, for this class. Now, as I just mentioned, though, sometimes your final business plan does not fall into this, though. But usually, you have some type of interest in one of these entertainment fields, right? Either music, audiovisual, printed media, or video games, something like that, right? And what we're going to do in this class is the first 2 weeks, in other words, the first two projects that you have in this class, we're going to show you how you would go about doing things the traditional way. And when I say traditional, I don't necessarily mean that that's bad compared to the new way. In fact, a lot of artists, a lot of people in the entertainment industry still prefer to try the traditional way first. And then if that doesn't come out right, or if that doesn't work out, then they'll go and try to do things the new way. Okay. But so when I say traditional, I don't mean that as in a pejorative sense at all. But the first 2 weeks, we're going to show you how you would go about trying to get your content out there traditionally, the way that it's always been done previously, right? The second half of this class, weeks 3 and 4, basically meaning project 3, will show you how you can kind of eschew the old model of doing things. Or even if you're not doing that intentionally, even if you just are trying to do things a traditional way and it's not working out, then we'll show you how you can get your content out there with the new self-publishing model. And in fact, we'll talk about some authors and some people that have done exactly that. Right? There was a author that we'll talk about who could not get her stuff out to agents, or she couldn't get her stuff to publishers. They just didn't listen to her. So she said, "Okay, you know what? I'm going to do it myself." And now she's a multimillionaire. And so we'll talk about that. Okay. And the way that this breaks down now, for the on-campus students that are listening to this, yours is slightly different. We'll talk about that here in a second. But for the online class, the course breaks down like this. Project 1, which we'll go over tonight, that is 10%. Project 2, which is going to be due at the end of next week, we'll obviously talk more about that in next week's go-to session, is worth 20%. Project 3, which is due at the end of the month, is worth 20%. And what we call Project 4, which is also called the collaboration assignment, if you will, or the Google Docs assignment, that's 10%. I'll talk about that in a second. The 4 weekly discussions, you guys are used to this. Each week is 5%. And to get the full credit for that, just make sure that you're posting twice per week, right? You have the initial post due by Wednesdays, and then you have the response post due on Sundays, right? And then you have one blog post, which is basically it's 300 words on anything that's going on in the entertainment industry. The blog post does not have to relate specifically to publishing and distribution, but it does have to relate obviously to the entertainment world somehow, the entertainment business. And we won't go over that tonight, but I mean, you guys are pretty used to these blog postings in the past. We'll go more over this, next week and the week after. That's going to be due in week 3, at the end of week 3. Then the master journal assignment is also due at the end of week 3. That's basically, very similar to the blog, just 300 words about what you got out of the class and what you've learned from it and how the course met your expectations, or how maybe it was different than what you expected. That's due at the end of week 3. And then the GPS, of course, is obviously 10% as usual. Make sure that you just turn in everything on time, that you don't attack other people on the discussion boards, etc. Right? Now, for the on-campus students, the only thing that's different than this is that instead of the 4 weekly discussions, you have the 3 case studies, basically sort of quizzes, and then that count for 5% each, and then 1 current event presentation that Kim talked about today that's also worth 5%. But other than that, everything is the same breakdown. It's just that the on-campus students have these case study assignments and the current event presentation, and the online students just have the weekly discussions, okay? But before I go on, let's talk for a second about this project 4, or what we call the collaboration assignment or the Google Docs assignment. Basically, what this is that if we go back, and hopefully everybody had a chance to look at this already, but if not, we'll go over it here right now. Basically, the collaboration assignment is, if we go under it here, what you need to do, and it's better to do this, I guess, as soon as possible, is just choose one of these 4 teams that relates to you, that ideally you're going to be using the same team or the same field for the projects that you do in this class. If we go to the collaboration assignment and we take a look at it here, oops, that's not going to work. Okay, let me go back here for a second. There are 4 teams to choose from. And this is due at the end of the month, but this is kind of an ongoing thing. So there's 4 teams here. You just choose one of them that relates to the things that you want to do in this class. So print, which would be, obviously books, magazines, things like that. The second category is film and TV. The third category is music, and the fourth category is gaming. And we also have a further explanation of these things, of what the project is, basically, if you go down to tell me more about the collaboration assignment, but I'll just kind of explain it now. What it is that you choose one of those 4 teams, and then throughout the month, you will post on the Google Docs for your team. You only have to choose one, even though many of you are talented in multiple fields. You only need to choose one team. And basically what it is it's kind of like an open discussion forum. So you can talk about anything that's going on in that field. It can relate to class directly, or it doesn't have to. Meaning that, for project 1, the point of the assignment is to find an agent and do a query letter. So you might go out there and you might do some research, and you might find a site that has a lot of listings for agents, or a lot of good tips for query letters. If you want to post that on your team's page, you certainly can. But if there's something else that's going on in your industry, so for example, you can talk about, like if you're on team film, for example, you can talk about how maybe a movie that was just released, that Tammy movie, for example, that was just released, didn't do nearly as good as they were thinking at the box office. Maybe you find an interesting article about that. Or if you find an article that relates to all the product placement that was going on in the recent Transformers movie or something like that. Basically, anything that applies to your field that you find interesting, you can post it on your Google Docs. And just to kind of give you an example here, let's go back here for a second, actually. Sorry to keep going back like this, but I'll show you an example of last month's, for example. Okay, so let's take a look here at, let's do last month's film team. Let's just take a look here at what they did. So what you do is you would find interesting articles, and through research, obviously, and what you do is you just post links and you give a brief explanation of those links. You don't now this group, this is an in-class group. They actually organize their page according to each student, meaning I think, well, actually, I guess they did alternate. But you see the point. What they did is you want to post your name and the date that you make a posting. And then what you do is you would find an interesting article or interesting resources, and then just give a brief description about what that is. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. Looks like there's a question from Howard. Okay, when you say consistent and frequently, would you recommend a student to post some short resources daily, every day? Excellent question, Howard. The way that we describe this is that for the on-campus students, we actually have 14 classes. I mean, technically there's 12 in class classes, and then these go-to sessions collectively count for 2 more. So what Kim usually says is that to get into that A range, you want to be posting ideally once a class. So that comes out to about 14 times a month, which comes out to about every other day or maybe 3 times a week, something like that. Um, so that should kind of give you an idea of what you should be shooting for here. So it's not a very hard assignment. You can just simply go to any sort of page that you do research on anyways. Like if you guys have, well, you guys didn't have the MLR class, you guys had the mastery class, but some of you may have, oh, actually in that mastery class, I take that back. In that mastery class, one of the things that you would sign up for is that Feedly, right? Um, there was also Google Reader is another one of those sources, but they got rid of Google Reader. But there's that Feedly page, right? So hopefully that you already have like a kind of a personal learning network, and so you can use stuff that comes into your Feedly account. You know, stuff that you find interesting, and just do some reading on it, and just make a posting every couple days, and you should be fine with that. And so that's what you should be shooting for that collaboration assignment. And like, you know, if we go through this whole page here, you could see like this Marcia, she posted quite a bit. It looks like I think she ended up posting like 18 times or something like that, or 20 times. But but that's kind of what the Google assignment is. The reason why we call it collaboration, that kind of sounds maybe a little bit deceptive because you're not actually working with people. In other words, you're graded individually, so you're not. It doesn't matter if one person on your team is not posting at all, and you're making all the postings. Don't worry, you'll get a good grade, and they won't. The reason why we call it collaboration, though, is just that ideally, kind of the point of the exercise is that you can help each other out, or at least share resources that might apply directly to the assignments and the projects that you turn in, but at the very least that you are making information contributions to your team's field, and you're kind of sharing information. That's why it's called collaboration, although you don't actually have to work directly with anybody, but that's why we call it collaboration, or we call it project 4. So that's kind of the setup of the class. And I should point out too, before we go on too, is that if you guys have any questions at all during this month, just feel free to send Kim or I an email, and we'll be happy to get back to you, answer any questions. And so for the online students, the week 1 discussion is to just answer some of these questions, right? Why might it be necessary to find an agent? How can you go about finding an agent? We'll talk about that here coming up in a couple slides here. What resources are out there? With many industries such as print media, it is becoming more and more difficult to secure an agent. So how can this be challenging, right? And one of the obvious answers to that is simply that agents are, in this day and age, kind of bombarded with artists or authors who think that they're extremely, extremely talented, and they have some great project in mind, but everybody kind of thinks they're an expert, right? And a lot of people are. That's why it can be very challenging. Is that there's so few agents out there, and there's so many great or even mediocre artists out there that are all trying to get the attention of the agent, and that can be a major challenge, right? So kind of the oversaturation of the market. And then go into maybe a little details. This isn't, necessarily lawyer talk. You guys had the advanced entertainment law class last time, and you had the negotiation class a few months before. But we're not looking for legal terms here, but just talk about some of the general specifications that you would maybe look for in a contract. Okay, so that's uh, the discussion for this week. Now, before we talk, though, specifically about Project 1, let me also point out, particularly those on the music industry, because for the most part, we tend to have quite a few music students each month, which is great, that's fine. But here, I just want to make a distinction here. When we talk about agents here in this class, though, we're not, for the discussion, it doesn't so much matter. You can be kind of a general discussion about agents. But as we do Project 1, though, specifically, we're not looking for talent or booking agents necessarily, because that mostly applies to that class you had a couple months ago with, it would have been Jill, I believe, the project and artist management class. That deals mostly with like artist, like talent agents. Here, we're not necessarily interested in getting the talent shopped around. We're more interested specifically in the creative content. So in the music side, we're not looking for talent or booking agents to get you gigs for Project One. We're looking more for agents, songwriting agents who can shop the creative content. Now, it is true that sometimes these things can overlap. Even in the film industry, I see this now all the time. That a lot of times the agents who are representing uh, screenwriters are sometimes call themselves talent agents. But let me show you something though here on this note, and I apologize for I keep going back here, but let me show you something real quickly here. Let's just take it a creative artist agency, okay? I'm looking mostly here when I'm doing this for the film industry, okay? Uh, okay, the one in LA. I just want to point out something that even though a lot of if you look here at their staff, um, a lot of them say talent agent, but you'll notice here that even if they are a talent agent, the one that you'd be looking for screenplay would have a specific title by their name, literary. Okay, and if you go through the list here, and this is the biggest agency in Hollywood, um, they have different. Obviously, you can see how many agents they have. I mean, tons and tons of them here. And even if a lot of them are talent agents, a lot of them specialize in the literature, right? So screenwriting is what I mean by that. So you'll notice here, so like literary talent agent, right? Motion picture talent agent, that might be literary. Here's one, co-head motion picture literary, right? That's what we're looking for in this class in terms of like screenwriting here. We're looking for, even if they're talent agencies, we're looking for agents to represent the literature in this, okay? On the music side, if you find a talent agent, you would want to make sure that they specialize in songwriting, not the talent. You know, even if they're part of a talent agency, we're looking for songwriting agencies or agents, I should say. Okay, so I just want to make that distinction here. And then, so let's talk here a little bit about. Um, okay, so obviously, you would for the collaboration assignment, make sure if you haven't done so already, you want to have a team in mind, right? And as Howard just asked, just try to post every couple days, 3 or 4 times a week on that. This technically is not graded until the end of the month, so it's not like Kim's going to be taking like weekly checks on who posts necessarily, but I mean, you want to avoid getting into like the last week where you have to, and then have to come up with like 15 different articles, right? You want to be doing this on a regular basis, obviously. So do that if you haven't done so already. Now, um, just to get into a little bit of the content here before we take a look specifically at Project One, what you need to do here. If you go through the first few chapters, Kim talks in that textbook a little bit about the traditional model and how it worked. And as you can see here, prior to the 1430s, publishing was a whole different animal than what it would become later on, because works were copied by hand. Really, for the most part, there was no reason for the vast majority of society to even read or write to begin with. They kind of lived in an agricultural society, right? So there was not really a need for the masses to be reading and writing anyways. But then something happened, obviously, and that was the invention of course, the printing press, right? That sort of changed the way that publishing works. And then all of a sudden you had the rise of the middle class. A lot more people were reading and writing and making contributions to society in terms of literature, things like that. And the way that the publishing process worked after that, in fact, even like artists like, Mozart, for example, and Beethoven, they had to get agents, believe it or not. And today it works in a similar process. You have to get an agent. Um, we'll talk more about the self-publishing model the second half of class, but for now, let's just stick to the traditional way. For the most part, traditional publishing, you have to basically get an agent. In other words, you can't just send your stuff to a publishing house. And when we say publishing in this class, we're not just talking about books. We're also talking about music, games, films, things like that. You can't just send your stuff. So, for example, sticking with the film industry that I was just talking about, right? You can't just simply send your stuff to New Line Cinema or something like that and say, hey, take a look at my screenplay. I want you to adapt this into a film. Every single time that you do that, they're going to turn you down. They're going to say, sorry, we don't accept unsolicited material, right? So what they require is an agent, sort of go between. They rely on agents to kind of be their censors, if you will, for lack of a better term. They rely on agents to deliver them the good works. So you can't write to a publishing house or a major company directly. You have to basically find an agent to be able to do this. And in order to do this, this really emphasizes what Project One is about and why Project One is so important. You know, if you send an agent, for example, your screenplay, they're not going to read it because they're going to have your letter and your screenplay, and then they would have 10 others or 15 others sometimes that very same day. And so they're going to say, hey, I don't have time to read this. Just tell me what it's about in a quick letter. And the way that it works is, as you can see here at the bottom, the agent will generally sign an agreement to, if you are able to capture an agent, they will oftentimes, or all the time actually, make you sign an agreement form and that they're going to represent you. And from then on, they'll take it from there. They'll contact the publishers and they'll say, hey, we have a good work here. Let's try to make a deal, right? And um, unfortunately, in the industry, though, it's really hard for independent artists to break in. This will tie in, again, the second half of the class when we look at self-publishing. But again, sticking with the first part of class here, generally speaking, if you imagine a major company, let's just say Disney, and let's just take one of their industries, let's just take books, for example. Disney, or whatever company you want to come up with, Random House, and a lot of these companies are owned by these larger companies like Disney, Viacom, etc. But let's just take for hypothetical, let's just take a Disney company. Unfortunately, they rely on the major authors, people like J.K. Rowling, John Grisham, major authors like that. And they spend about 90% of their time focusing on those A-list authors. So they kind of spend about 90% of their time on about 10% of their artists. And unfortunately, if you do the math, that only leaves about 10% of their time is going to be spent on marketing and getting the 90% out there. So that's one of the problems that we have to face and one of the challenges that we have to face with independent artists. And so as a because of the fact that getting an agent is very difficult, um, you really need to get a good query letter in order to attract that agent and to make them say, yes, okay, I'm interested, send me your stuff. Because you have to realize that they're going to be, as I said, they're going to have your letter in front of them, but they're also going to have 15 or 20 that very same day. So you really need to stand out. Okay, so that's kind of a segue into Project One. But before we go on, one of the first questions that we always get is that where can we find an agent? Okay, so let's take a look here real quickly at what Project One is. Okay, okay, Project One, if we take a look at it here, what you need to do is you need to do some research and you need to find an agent. And well, obviously, step one is to determine what your content is, right? Whether you have a book or a magazine, whether you have a video game, whether you have a music project, whether you have a film or television, figure out what that content is. Then number two is to do research and to find an agent. I'll show you some of these things here in a second. Then number three is you need to draft a letter to that agent. And then finally, along with your letter, just submit a source as to where you found that agent, okay? And we do have some resources here in our library, or our FSO page, I should say, that you could take a look at. I'll show you the sample query letter here in a second, but there's also some agent query tips that we'll take a look at. But there's also literary agent guide and before you contact an agent. Those two documents at the top here the two bullet points at the top. Those can be found on the FSO, the resources. But I want to quickly go over this question though, these two questions, 2 and 3, okay? Because it is true that your deliverable is basically number 3, right? You have to draft a letter, and that's what you're going to be submitting through FSO. But a big part of the assignment, though, is actually number 2, finding an agent in the first place. And the question always comes up, well, where can we find an agent? And the answer to that is that, well, you kind of have to do the research. That's partly what Project 1 is about, is you doing the research to find an agent. Now, there are a lot of good sources out there, right? There are, let me get rid of this here for a second. There are a lot of sources out there. There are these ones in particular, but there's other ones too. There's the Guide to Literary Agents for those of you in the book side. On the music side, there is the Songwriters Market. There are also How to Get a Literary Agent, but there are also some good websites out there. Let me just show you a couple. I mean, there's IMDb Pro if you have that. But even if not, I believe I might have some other ones on here. Well, here, I'll show you, for those of you on the film side, even if you don't have IMDb Pro, because I know that costs money, there's also a good site out there called HollywoodLitSales.com. And here they have listings of lots of agents and agencies along with agents, and they tell you who, usually they'll tell you who the contact person is. They also will tell you up here, you know, if they consider unsolicited, or I'm sorry, if they will consider new clients and things like that. So let's just take a look here at let's take a look here at Paradigm for a second. Now, sometimes they don't, yeah, except for, like for some of these big ones like this, they won't give you a contact information. Now, for the purposes of this project, you certainly can, if you want to call them, or maybe go on their website and maybe they do have a contact person you can find. You can, for the purposes of Project 1, you don't have to do this for real, right? This can be hypothetical, so you don't actually have to send this. So if you want to use a big agency like this, you could. Although, I mean, to be realistic, you should probably stick to a smaller one. And so let's just take another one here. I think that the ones with 2 stars here are, yeah, okay, we'll consider writers only as a result of persons known to. So these are like the big ones. But let's take a look one at, like, let's see here. Try to find one that I know of. Let's try this one. Well, you get the idea here. Sometimes they don't always give you contact information, and sometimes, you know, in real life, if you do this, you would need to actually call to find someone specific. And actually, let me try Barry Perelman, because I know. I'm not seeing it on here, but by the way, this list right here, even though this is Hollywood Lit Sales, this is film. Some of these publishers and agents actually apply to those of you on the book side as well. But this is just one site that I'm going to, right? There's lots of sites out there if you do research on them. There's also one called, if I go to this, Absolute Right. I believe this site has agent listings as well. They have all kinds of good information too. They'll actually tell you about how to do a query letter too, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But the point of this, though, is that part of the research that you have to do here comes on your own, right? You have to do research. You have to find the right agent that is going to work out for you. By the way, because a lot of these industry books, and these are just 3 of them here, but there's some other ones out there, a lot of them do cost money. And there's a couple things to say about this. Obviously, you know, Full Sail is not going to give you the money to buy some of these. But if you do this for real, if you're planning on doing this for real, you probably do. It's a good idea, I would think, to want to, on your own, go ahead and buy one of these. Obviously, you want to get the latest edition. But even that being said, if you go to any major school library, for example, they have these in our Full Sail library, but also a public library will usually have these as well. And so you can check those out for free. at a library. But also, even if worse comes to worse, you can always go to Barnes and Noble or one of those bookstores that also has like a coffee shop, and you can simply take one, go to the coffee shop, and simply copy down some of these for free, and then put the book back, right? Um, but of course, there's some other sites out there. The Writers Guild of America, too, for those of you on the film side, also have listings of agents. In fact, let me go ahead and show you that one too while we're on it. Let me go to wga.org. There's, of course, the Writers Guild of America East, and there's the one West here. But if you go down here to Writers Resources, they have an agency list, and they provide you with agencies. Now, of course, once again, to find a specific person, which is really, really important, we'll talk about that here in a second, but you would actually need to call or go to their website to find the specific person. Okay. Okay. So the next thing that you do after you find an agent is submit a query letter. That's what you're going to be turning into FSO, and some of the things that are in the query letter here. Let me just actually show you here. This thing here. We have this in our resources that's called Agent Query Tips. So let me blow this up so you can see some of them. You can see the do's and don'ts here. Let me just look at the don'ts. One of the things that you want to avoid is having fancy or cute font, right? Just stick to traditional, conventional fonts, right? You're not going to wow them. If anything, it's going to be a detriment to you because they're going to think that you're trying too hard to impress them, and they're going to, just shrug you off, right? You don't need to specify that you're looking for them to represent you because that's pretty self-evident. Just get to the point of what your screenplay is, or what your book is, or what the music project is, or what the game is, right? And you don't want to hype up your project too much. Like, don't say that, hey, I just wrote a book and it's going to be the next Lord of the Rings or something like that. That's hyperbole, right? So let me show you some examples here of some query letters. And this will kind of give you a guide as to what we're looking for project one. And of course, if you do this for real, you definitely want to take note of this, because we'll show you the do's and don'ts for this. So let me first show you this example. Now, this is from our friend Suzanne, who I know that you guys probably had the negotiation class with, it was probably Christy, but it may have been Elizabeth, one of the two, right, a few months ago. Well, the person that used to teach that class, in fact, the person that kind of designed that class was Suzanne Bain. And she left Full Sail about a year, maybe a couple years ago, but she's actually maybe coming back. Who knows? But anyways, though, she kind of gave permission for us to show this as an example of a bad query letter. Okay, it's not to say that this is terrible, but there's just a lot of things that she could have improved on. Okay, so right off the bat, before looking at the letter itself, there's one thing in particular. It's not a huge problem, but it's technically incorrect that she did wrong. One thing is you need to have the date actually above the addressee, right? So the date should technically be here, right? So you see what I just did? So the date would be on top, not like this, okay? So the date's in the wrong place. The next major problem that I can tell you, because we've had real life agents come and speak to our class, and I've talked with enough people in the industry to know that a huge problem that they see is that sometimes people will address a letter to whom it may concern. Okay, that's a big mistake. So you want to definitely avoid this. The reason for that is, if I go back to my list here of something like this, right? Let's just say that you write a letter to creative artist agencies to whom it may concern. Well, just look at how many people are there, okay? The person at the front desk, the secretary or administrative assistant or whoever that gets this, is going to take this and throw it in the trash. Because who are they supposed to send it to? Everybody? I don't think so, right? So you have to understand that a lot of these agencies have multiple agents that work for them. So you always, always, always need to do the research to find the specific person that you're looking for, right? And let me go back here for a second. If you go to one of those books, if you go to one of these guidebooks here, they're pretty good because they will tell you the specific contact person and they will tell you exactly how they want you to send the letter to them. What I mean by that is that sometimes one agent will say, hey, send me a traditional letter through the mail along with the self-addressed stamped envelope, okay, and I'll get back to you. Other agents will say, send me an email. Here's my email address. Some agents will say, send me the letter, your career letter along with a one-page synopsis. Another agent might say, send me a career letter along with a three-page synopsis, and so on and so forth. So every agent is different. So if you do this in real life, you definitely want to pay close attention to the specifics of what they say for in the guide listing. Now, obviously for you guys, for project one, you just need to submit the letter and you just need to follow the templates and the format that we're talking about now. Okay, so it just has to be a one-page letter. You don't have to send the synopsis or the treatment or the proposal or the press kit. We'll talk more about that next week, okay? But for project one, all you need to focus on right now is the letter, okay? And obviously you're submitting it through FSO, so you're gonna do it in Microsoft Word, ideally. But I mean, like, if you do this in real life, though, the point is that, you know, a lot of times they'll tell you to send them an email. Not, you wouldn't do it in Microsoft Word necessarily and send them a letter through the mail, right? But I just want to point that out, okay? But you definitely want to find the specific person, the contact person. Also, agents that have come and spoke to our class have also said in real life, sometimes they specifically leave out the person to call precisely because they want you to do the effort to pick up the phone and call them, because that kind of serves somewhat as a screen. They want to know who's serious and who's doing this right and who are the punks that aren't, right? So that we can get rid of them. And they're not going to get mad at you. They're not going to get mad at you if you just pick up the phone and call one of those agencies and say that, hey, I'm just writing a query letter. I just want to know who should I address it to. They'll usually tell you and they're not going to get upset with you, you know? So that's the first mistake that Suzanne makes with this letter, okay? The next mistake is this first paragraph. It's kind of dull, for lack of a better word. Now, sometimes people will compare a cover letter to a job with a query letter for a book or a music project or something like that. They're sometimes similar, but there are some major differences. The first one is this opening paragraph. Now, in real life, for a cover letter for a job, it usually is okay to say, hey, I'm writing in response to your ad that I saw in, you know, monster.com or something like that, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. That's okay for a cover letter. For a query letter, though, for project one, you want to avoid, I am writing in response to your latest call for book submissions or your latest ad, things like that. It's just a little dull. You want to start out the letter with what we call an opening sizzle line. And I'll show you an example. The next example I'll show you actually has a better opening paragraph, okay? But the point is that this first paragraph is a little bit dull, okay? The next thing, she says, okay, next paragraph is okay. This paragraph, though, this sounds a little like hyperbole. Readers will laugh hysterically and then sit in quiet contemplation as they ponder such critical inquiries. That's just, like I said, it sounds a little bit corny. It sounds like hyperbole. The agent's going to be rolling their eyes and they're going to say, hey, listen, I'll be the judge if people are going to laugh hysterically, okay? Don't tell me that, okay? So that line is pretty bad, okay? Then the rest of it is pretty good. She talks about how the books only need ISBN numbers and things like that. And then she also says, I'm a college professor, yoga teacher, music producer, attorney, and author living in Orlando. She talks about her website, which is good. And so I guess the rest of the letter is pretty good, right? So this is an example of, I would say, a mediocre letter. It could have been better. I mean, it's well written in the sense that there's no typos or anything like that, but the major mistakes, though, of course, you want to find a specific person. The date should be actually up here. and some of the language could have been changed to make it a little bit more appealing or a little bit more attractive, okay? So that's Suzanne's letter. Now, an example of a better letter, but still with some very specific flaws, are this one, and this is actually the one that you can find on FSO. It might be altered slightly, but it's basically this one, okay? So let's first of all go over the positives before we get to the negatives. The positives compared to Suzanne's letter. Okay, so the positive is, first of all, you can see here that it's shorter, which sometimes shorter is better. Not all the time. I don't want to dissuade you from doing like a lengthy letter if you feel like you need to, but for one, it should not go over 1 page though. Want to be clear about that. And for two, don't always think that shorter means worse or a worse grade, because sometimes shorter is better. So first of all, this is shorter and it reads a little bit quicker, and I would say a little bit better in that regard. Number two, you'll notice that this opening paragraph is much, much better. It says, what if, as an initiation, you were buried alive for an hour with an air tank and a radio? You then learn that the people who put you there had just been killed in a car wreck. Now, that's pretty appealing right off the bat. That's what we call an opening sizzle line. That gets the attention. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of curious to know about this a little bit more. Definitely more so than Suzanne's, right? That sounds like a pretty good opening paragraph. Okay, that's another good thing. Then he talks a little bit about himself. He says, I'm an award-winning journalist, television anchorman, so on and so forth. I'm an avid reader, and I track many best-selling authors and novels. And I appreciate you taking the time to read this. And then thanks for your time. Sincerely, Jim Brown. Okay, so in that regard, content-wise, I would say that this is actually a better letter than Suzanne's. Okay, but that being said, there are some major, major flaws here. Okay, the first thing right off the bat is that if you notice at the top, he doesn't give any other contact information other than his physical address, which is really, really stupid when you think about it. I mean, what if the agent likes this? They're gonna say, what? I have to write this guy a letter through the mail. He doesn't give a phone number or an email address, so I can get a hold of him immediately, right? So that's a huge problem right there. You need to have a phone number, email address, and by the way, too, those of you that are concerned about privacy, I promise you, Kim and I, if you put your phone number and address, we're not going to share it with anybody. We're not going to call you, but I mean, you can always put in like a fake number, fake email address, fake address, things like that. Okay. But anyways, that's the first problem with this. Okay, so the person doesn't put in any other contact information besides their physical address. The next thing here is that he does have a specific person, first of all, which is good. That's what you need. But right here, when he addresses the person, first of all, since this is technically a business letter, even if you do socially know the person, or even if you've met the person, you still should not use their first name right here. So you wouldn't put Dear Mark, you would put Dear Mr. Ryan. So it would be something like this, right? Dear Mr. Ryan. And let's say it's a woman, you would put Ms. MS period. Even if you know that she's married, you would not put Mrs. You would always put Ms. for business letters. The next thing is that technically speaking, because this is a formal letter, you would avoid the comma and you would put a colon right there. So you see what I just did? There was a comma here after the name. You would actually put in a colon, okay? Then the next thing, I mean, the content, like I said, is pretty good here. Maybe I want to know a little bit more details. So like when he says, I'm an award-winning journalist, my question is, okay, for who? For what publication? Or what TV station or radio station, right? When he says, I'm a television anchorman, okay, what station? I've written a weekly column, okay, for who? Right? When he says, I've received national recognition, okay, that's kind of vague. I want to know, okay, what awards are we talking about here? So maybe just a little bit more detail here in this paragraph. The rest of it's pretty good. Technically speaking, since the title of this work is called The Hill, titles actually need to be in italics. So you would just put that in italics. And so that would actually clean up the letter and make it technically grammatically correct. Okay, so that's another example of a letter. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to show you here is a student example from a couple months ago. I think that this is pretty good. There might be a couple flaws here. I took out the student's name for privacy purposes here, but they have this where you see the X's, that would be their name, right? Then they had their address, their phone number, their email address. Okay, so that's much better right there. You want your name, your physical address, your phone number, and your email address, okay? And maybe even if you have a personal website or something like that. Then they have the date in the right place. They have the name here. They have the address information is correct, right? They use the Mr. and they have the colon there. And then she says, okay, imagine your life is took an unpredictable turn and now you live homeless on the streets. In the middle of your daily struggle, a stranger approaches you and asks you, do you want to live your dream for 24 hours and blah, blah, blah. So pretty good, again, what we call an opening sizzle paragraph, right? It kind of gets the agent's attention or the reader's attention right away, right? Technically, though, I'm looking here at some flaws. I think the name of this show, well, this sentence right here, she might want to clean this up a tad. She says, "Welcome to the Unfortunate Get Fortunate TV show." Since the title, which she spells out down here at the bottom, you would maybe want to put the title in the opening paragraph too. So, welcome. It would be something like this, right? Welcome to the TV show. We'll say TV show. The Unfortunate Get Fortunate. And then since it's a title, you would put this in italics or something like that. Okay, and then a little bit more about myself. I'm a journalist from Europe and a television screenwriter with 4 years of experience in the industry. My storytelling and writing have received international recognition and various awards. Again, maybe I would want to know a little bit more there about what awards and recognition she's talking about. And then, but she says, I would love to work with you in the future. The full manuscript of The Unfortunate Get Fortunate is ready for your request. The only thing to say about this, and it's really not a big deal at all for Project One, is that she's talking about a TV show. So I wouldn't really say manuscript. I would actually say the full treatment. Because a treatment, as we'll see next week for a TV show, the treatment actually has not just one manuscript, but it actually has a kind of a layout of like at least 7 episodes. But again, we'll talk more about that next week. At the time that she did this, she probably didn't know that, so that's technically okay. But you could see here that she did a nice job on that. Okay, so that's an example of what you want to be shooting for this project, for Project One. Now, the only other thing, the last thing to say here, if I go back to the instructions, let me go back to the instructions for a second. The one thing that a lot of students sometimes overlook is this number 4. You need to include the source for where you found the information. Now, obviously, in real life, you wouldn't include this in a letter necessarily, but for the purposes of Kim and I, you need to do that, right? So we know they're just not making up some agents. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to do this in APA in any way, but just at least include the link, the site for, or the book for where you found the information, right? So that's what she did here at the bottom, right? She says that now I think she did this in APA technically, or but it doesn't even have to be this complex of citing. You can just simply put the website, just copy and paste the URL, and explain where you found the information, right? So she actually lists 3 different sites, but you really only need to list one, just the source for where you found the information. And by the way, I'm looking at this here. Another good source for those of you on the book team, but also it could be crossover into TV and film and even music, is agentquery.com. I think they have good listings there for agents. She also uses WritersNet, which is writers.net/agents. And she also uses the publisher's marketplace. So the point is that there's a lot of these different books out there that you can find and do the research on. Howard asks, okay, now since we must provide some short background information in the second paragraph, is it okay to exaggerate and sugarcoat it? Yeah. Um, Howard, that's another great question. The answer to that is yes, you can. You can sort of invent information. The one thing that we say about that, because that's a good question, is that don't exaggerate too much. What I mean by that is, let's just say that you're on the music team. Don't tell the agent that you just sold out the LA Coliseum, for the last 38 nights or something like that, and that your previous albums have grossed over $100 million or something like that, or you're a personal friend of Jay-Z or Lady Gaga and they're recommending you or something. It's okay to exaggerate, but just don't go too far. Don't. Let me rephrase that. It's okay to be hypothetical, but just don't exaggerate things too much. Okay. But yeah, if you want to sort of imagine yourself as if you're writing this a year from now, and by that time you have something already complete, and you have like a let's say a larger fan base. If we take her example for a second here, she says, I have a wide fan base and on social media and growing publicity in the US. I don't know if that's true, but it's okay, because let's just say that she's doing this like in a year from now. Maybe by that time she envisions this, so that's okay, right? um it's okay too to say that you've won some recognition and various awards. Now, in her case, I think she's from Croatia, so it's possible that she may have received some awards or some recognition, or maybe let's just say hypothetically that she is going to attend a conference, a professional conference in December, and let's just say that it's already, it's July. It's okay to say that you attended that conference last year or something like that. So it's okay to invent information. It's just don't exaggerate and go too far, if that makes sense. So another example would be like those of you on the like screenplay side. Let's just say that you have an idea in mind, and let's just say that you are going to submit your screenplay for a contest, and let's just say it's a major contest out in LA. It's okay to say that you submitted your work to a contest and it received second or third place or something like that, or even if it won, and that's okay. But don't say that, like, Steven Spielberg just read your draft and wants to make it as soon as possible. So let's get this deal done, Mr. Agent, or Miss Agent. Don't write it like that, right? So okay, so I think that should give you guys a good idea on how to do Project One. If there's any questions, though, of course, just let Kim and I know, and we'll be happy to answer them. But that's basically what you have to do for this week's assignments. Okay, and again, we'll get into next week's assignment next week. Okay. Now, the last thing here, and by the way, these go-to sessions, I mean, I don't know what they are in your other classes, but we usually tend not to go more than an hour usually. And of course, we stick around and we put this in the archives afterwards. And we're here to answer any questions. If you have any questions the rest of the evening, just send an email and I'll be happy to answer them. But in general, these go-to sessions usually last, usually no more than an hour. The week 3 one might last a little bit longer, but that should do it for tonight. Now, the one thing I have to say, though, the last thing that we have to do is the attendance questions. Now, just so you know, though, anybody that's listening to this, these are only for the on-campus students, okay? This question comes up every now and then. I'm not sure if you guys have to do these in your previous classes, your other classes, but these attendance assignment questions are only for the on-campus students. The reason for that is that in the old days, we used to have 14 classes, right? And then for reasons dealing with to save space time and things like that, they make the on-campus students attend these go-to sessions as well that count for collectively another 2 classes. So The online students don't have to answer these. You don't have to submit anything. The on-campus students, you'll notice if we go down to the page here, well, it's going to take me a minute to log out. Well, here, I'll just show you. Just in case you're an on-campus student and you haven't seen this yet, let me go back here for a second and show you where you can find this. You will notice for you on-campus students that for your section, you have somewhere down here at the bottom these attendance certification questions. Okay, that's where you can find these very questions that I'm about to go over. This is what you have to do, right? They don't count for a grade, but they count for attendance, right? So they're easy and they make you guys do these things. They're attendance certification, okay? So these are only for the on-campus students. The online students, you don't see that, you don't have to do these, okay? So for you on-campus students, let's just go over these one by one. Number one, what piece of content have you chosen? Remember, it could be real, it could be hypothetical. This is simply, and again, it's Tuesday, so you have a little bit of time before you really have to start doing this project. You have a couple days here, but you should definitely by Sunday be able to answer what is your content. So is it a book? Is it a magazine? Is it a film or a screenplay? Is it a TV project? Is it a music project? Music meaning CD or digital collection of songs like on iTunes or something like that? Is it a video game or something like that? Okay. So what is it? That's all you have to describe is what is your content for number one. Number two, simply what Google Doc team have you joined, right? There's only 4 of them. There's print, there's film/TV, there's video games, and there's music, right? Just one of those 4 teams. Which one have you joined? Number 3, why is it inappropriate to choose a talent or booking agent for this project? The answer to that is that a talent or booking agent is more interested in the talent or the artist themselves, artist management. So that's why it's inappropriate in this context for this class to choose a talent or booking agent. Instead, you need to choose an agent who can shop the content, not the artist. So for number 3, you can literally put it's inappropriate to choose an agent that represents talent. Instead, we're looking for an agent that represents content. Okay. Number 4, discuss the ways in which you can find an agent. The answer to that is simply you can find them through research, industry books. The Guide to Literary Agents, for example, that I showed you. You could choose just web research, just by going on Google for an hour and finding agents that way and finding good sites out there. You can go to industry sites like the Writers Guild of America. There was that absolutewrite.com. I think there's that site called agentwriter.com. Things like that, okay? Number 5, what kind of formatting style is required for this project? I should have mentioned this, but technically speaking, it's considered block formatted, which is not indented. Meaning that if we take a look here at a letter, block formatting, I assume probably everybody knows what this means, but it just means that you're not indenting. You just have paragraphs that are blocks, right? They're not indented like this would be, right? Not indented. And it's single spaced with 2 spaces between paragraphs, right? So there's a space here. So it's considered block style. And for number 6, what are acceptable ways in which you can cite or source the agent that you've chosen for this project? Well, you don't have to put APA, don't have to put MLA or anything like that. All you just have to put is that you just need to explain where you found the agents. So you can copy and paste the URL. You can, just put the name of the book. If you put the name, I also put the year of it, meaning that if you chose like the Songwriters Market, don't just put the Songwriters Market, put the Songwriters Market from 2014 or something like that. Number 7, what is a sizzle opener and where is it found in the letter? Well, the answer to that is that a sizzle opener is just the opening paragraph that really captures and attracts the reader right from the start, okay? So it really grabs the reader's attention. That's what we mean by a sizzle opener. And where is it found? At the beginning. So opening paragraph or first paragraph of the letter. Okay, number 8, what kind of information should you provide in the query letter? Well, for that, you need to provide information about the content itself, a little bit of content about who you are, and contact information, how they can find you, right? That's what a letter is. So let me go back to this student here. She has content about what the show is. She has content about what about herself and her credentials. And then she also has information here, contact information, how to get in touch with her, right? I would love to hear from you again, and I look forward to your response. So those are basically the 3 things. If you want to follow the 3 paragraph structure, the first paragraph is about the content, the second paragraph is about your credentials, and the third paragraph is kind of a closing paragraph and then saying something to the effect of, I hope to hear from you soon, or I look forward to talking to you soon. But that's not to say that you only have to have 3 paragraphs. So if you want to have more, that's fine. There's no kind of set format to that. Number 9, what resources do we provide to help you complete this assignment? Well, let me just quickly go back to the this list here. If you want to put down this, there are these sources: the agent query tips. There's a document that we have that's called Before You Contact an Agent. There's the literary agent guide, and there's the sample query letter. And then also for number 9, if you literally want to put, we provide the go-to information, the archive session. So we provide that, and we also provide you with what was I going to say here? Well, we have additional letters here in the go-to session, right? Some other examples. Oh, I was going to say, what for number 9, you could also put our YouTube page, right? Our official YouTube page, which has lots of other sources that can sort of help you with those podcasts. And then typically number 10, how long should a query letter be? 1 page or less. Okay, so 1 page or less. Now, that being said, it's okay if you put your references, like, your reference, your source for where you found the agent on additional page. That's okay, right? That doesn't matter. We're not talking about that. But the letter itself should be 1 page or less, like this, right? Brevity is good. Okay, so that takes care of the session tonight. Once again, this is recorded, so this will be on the archives either later tonight or tomorrow. Sometimes with these archives, sometimes it's tough to post them on YouTube because they're usually kind of big. So sometimes the processing time on YouTube takes a while. But if not tonight, then definitely tomorrow. And of course, you can always go back and view an archive session from a previous month because in general, we haven't changed the course for a while. So the content of the sessions themselves hasn't really changed that much. Okay, so thank you guys all for attending. Once again, if you came in late, I apologize again. I had the date technically wrong. It was right in FSO, but the date itself on the little go-to announcement was actually for tomorrow. But that's okay because you can just watch this tomorrow. And then also I'll probably be on later tomorrow night just in case anybody misinterpreted that or had any other additional questions or something like that. So want to thank everybody for attending. Once again, we'll hope to see everybody again next week, same time, same place. And you on-campus students, of course, we'll see you in class on Thursday. So, okay, everybody, thanks for attending and have a good rest of the night.